this was a team I thought that our fan base could really get behind and be proud of.
Welcome into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast, following the beat of Husker basketball. Here are your hosts, Blake and Mike.
Nebraska shows fight on the road, but ultimately falls to Illinois 87-84 in overtime. Hello, everybody, and welcome in again to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. My name is Blake, here with co-host Mike, and I made the long trek out to Champaign, came so close to sweet, sweet, sweet victory, Mike, and finally could have got the road monkey off of our back. But we still continue in search of that elusive road win.
Yeah, still looking for it. Definitely thought we had it. I was disappointed with the end of the first half, but then had to realize we were up 2 on the road against a great team in Illinois, and was pretty happy about that. And then obviously the end of the game was a mess, and suddenly I didn't think we had it because we were down 10, and then we clawed back, and then overtime, and absolute roller coaster. But couldn't be more proud of the guys for, as you said, they showed a lot of fight. I think it's a couple games in a row now. Been down double digits to some really solid opponents, and they found a way to claw back, and in both instances, I guess, force overtime. Different results, obviously, between the Wisconsin and Illinois game, but yeah, real proud of the guys and the heart and the effort they showed in this one.
And there's a lot to get to, both what we could control and some things maybe we could not control in this game that we're going to break down. But let's start with things that we can control, Mike. Tominaga went for a staggering 31-3-3, going 9 of 14 from the field, hits 5 of his 7 3-point attempts. Very nice welcome back game from Casey, and some of the shots that he made were absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, that's, a classic Casey game. I feel like we'd been waiting for one for a while. Obviously, he just hadn't had a good stretch of games recently, but he got it started early and often and super efficient, 9 for 14. And I think that's a new career high for him. So, and then he added 8 free throws, and we needed obviously every single one of the free throws. When you're forcing OT, every point matters. So great performance from him. Couldn't be more proud. Love to see it. I know, he's kind of the face of the program a little bit. And everyone loves when he pops off like that.
You mentioned free throws, Mike. Nebraska went 14 of 14 for 100% numbers from the free throw line. And I don't know when the last time, especially in the Hoiberg era, we've ever even come close to doing that. So that was obviously a very nice thing to see. Rink Mast complimented Tominaga well in the pick and pop game, going for 22, 6, and 2, 8 of 21 from the field for him. So a lot of shot attempts, goes 4 of 9 from deep. Played pretty well without fouling against a really physical Illinois team, Mike. And again, that 2-game that he was running with Casey really stood out in this one.
Yeah, really stood out. I think stood out to me a little bit. I feel like he looked a little rushed inside. You mentioned he went 8 for 21 and 4 or 9 from beyond the arc. So, he's 4 of 12 from 2, which just isn't quite what I've come to expect from Mast. I feel like he's pretty money at those, little jump hooks. So to see him miss a couple this game was a little off, but, overall great game. We needed, another scorer to step up. It couldn't just be Casey. A couple great games from Rink in a row now. He's really putting together a pretty solid second half of the season.
Juwan Gary comes back with force. Mike has a double-double, going 12, 11, and 4. 4 of 5 from the field, hits all 4 of his free throw attempts. It is amazing how big of a difference, especially on the glass. And we'll get to that later. Nebraska still didn't do great on the glass, but how much different it looks, even with Juwan Gary on the floor.
No, it's night and day. He brings especially I feel like on the offensive end, I feel like, we tend to send, 3 guys back. We're not really chasing after offensive boards, but it seems like if there's one person chasing it down, it's always Juwan Gary. The dude, he elevates, he's in the right spot. He's, obviously an incredible athlete. But his positioning and the way he just reads the ball off the rim is really something special. The double-double, like you mentioned, incredible game from him. It seems like that calf isn't bothering him so much anymore. So knock on wood that he'll remain healthy the rest of the season.
CJ Welcher cools off, going for 2, 2, and 1, going 1 of 6 from the field, did not hit any of his 3-point attempts. A little bit of a cool-off game. The defense really zoned in on him, Mike, I noticed, chasing him around, giving him almost the Casey Tominaga treatment. So look, you're never going to shoot 55% consistently from 3-point. That's imaginary land. But Casey going off really kind of helped offset anything Wilcher did or did not do. That being said, had Wiltshire just made one of them, we might be talking about a different result today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would, and obviously, as you said, you can't shoot that percentage over the course of a season. You know, you're going to have cool down games. You're going to have games where it's just not quite fallen. It's not that his shots looked bad. You know, he still ended up with a couple points. You know, he didn't make a three, which is unfortunate. But yeah, as you mentioned, you know, they were putting Shannon Jr. on him. They had some pretty athletic guys guarding him, you know, in his pocket the whole game. You know, I feel like every time one of our shooters is coming around the screen, they're getting pulled, which I don't want to speak on officiating because it happens on both ends. I'm sure we do it too, but very physical game. And I don't know if that's, you know, leads to CJ not having the typical game we've been seeing from him, or just like you said, you know, one of those off nights. But yeah, it's a good thing that Casey at least popped off. Otherwise, this would have been a very different story, I think, in the post game.
Then rounding out the players, Bryce Williams went for 7-3-1, going 3 of 12 from the field, hitting one of his 5 3-point attempts. He missed a couple layups down low, Mike. I know that's kind of your little annoyance when you miss the bunnies. But really what sticks out to me, Mike, and I mentioned it in the last episode, is Bryce Williams only had 3 rebounds. And when we're getting killed on the glass and you look for not people at fault necessarily, but where there's a ton of improved ceiling, if you will, you got to look at Bryce Williams first. And having 3 rebounds against a really physical, good rebounding Illinois team probably is not going to cut it.
I think you're spot on. And, you know, as you mentioned, we're not going to single anybody out, but we know that Bryce definitely has it in him to grab 7-8 boards a game. And you look on the other side of Ty Rodgers, you know, he's a guard and he pulled down 14 rebounds for Illinois. And I think that's just kind of unacceptable. I see no reason why a guard should end up with 14 rebounds, 5 of them on the offensive side. So that's just a lack of, you know, awareness, a lack of boxing out, fundamentals. You know, I hate my lack of fundamentals, whether it's bunnies or not boxing out, but just, yeah, we needed a little bit more work on the glass. You know, story of the season on the road so far.
And Fred has kind of keyed in on 2 of the big metrics that go into Nebraska winning or losing, especially on the road, those being turnovers and rebounding. He had a comment to share about that in the postgame press conference.
As I told him in the locker room, now we know we can do it. And you're playing one of the top teams in the country on their home floor in an unbelievable environment, and you have a chance to win. You have a lead with under 5 seconds to go in regulation, even though we got out-rebounded by 17. And that's the theme for us. We've talked a lot about taking care of the basketball and rebounding. And when we do both, we generally win. When we take care of one, we're in a close game like we were tonight. If we get beat in both and we turn it over and give up offensive rebounds, we get it handed to us.
And in this one, Mike, the Huskers took care of one of the two keys, only turning it over 9 times and having 12 assists. So actually a rare positive ratio on that side for the Huskers. But as we saw, again, 17 offensive rebounds and losing the rebounding battle by 17 total. I think we gave Illinois 50 total rebounds. It was a close score because we got one of the 2 exactly as Fred mentioned, but the rebounding just was not up to par.
No, and it wasn't, and I'm sure the team knows that. And it's tough. It's been a struggle all season, and it's just hard to see him get it so right some games, especially at home, and then just lose it somehow on the road. And, you know, it's hard reading the bounces off of rims and stuff like that when it's not your home gym. I get that. But at the end of the day, you know, putting a body on a guy and boxing him out, you know, there were a couple of times that I saw Casey do a great job at that. I'd give him a shout out. One time a guy absolutely jumped over his back and did not get called for it. And I think Casey got hit in the head, which was ridiculous, whatever. Anyways, but it's not that hard to find a guy and put a body on him. And if it's man, you find your man. If we're going into zone, which, you know, we do occasionally, you got to find somebody close to you and just box out. And if we can take care of that, I think, you know, we got a good chance in the rest of our games. Yeah, it's just those 2 bugaboos, you know, turnovers and rebounding.
You mentioned we went to a zone. We did try a 2-3 zone for 2 to 3 to 4 possessions in there. It worked pretty well in on-ball defense, obviously killed us on the glass. I think in that stretch, we gave up 6 offensive rebounds and maybe even 3 in one possession. So, you know, solve one problem and create another in that side of things. But I actually did kind of like that 2-3 zone just to switch it up. But again, you know, it's pretty easy to see that when you're lacking rebounding ability on the floor, to going to zone is only going to make that worse. But Mike, I want to throw out the bat signal. Where is Blaze Cada to help in our rebounding efforts? We've been told he's running full court reps. if he's not fully conditioned, that's one thing. I understand that, but we don't need him to play starters minutes. We're only asking for 8 to 10 minutes to give Juwan Gary, Mast, and Alec a blow when needed. We need to get him back on the floor.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think it'd be a huge upside if we do get a chance and he gets back and he can play some minutes. You talk about, him not being fully conditioned, and at a certain point, it's not even about how many minutes you can handle before you're tired. It's, if your body and your muscles are conditioned to avoid a re-injury. But if he's running full court at practice, that's a great sign. I really hold out hope that we'll see him at some point this year, because as we mentioned, he would help tremendously with rebounding. He would help tremendously in case of foul trouble, anything like that. If, we just have another big we can go to, because right now we're really running, three bigs. Is that, Jawan Gary, Rink Mast, and Josiah Alec are really the only big guys that we put in. And that's just going to wear on a team over the course of the season and over the course of a game. So he'd be a huge addition. I'm not going to speak for his medical situation, what's going on there. I don't have privy knowledge to that, but would be a huge get if we managed to get him back here in these last 8 games at some point.
And Mike, a lot of what we talked about in regards to our Illinois preview really came to fruition, I thought. The numbers showed that Illinois is a very good offensive rebounding team. Well, there you go. They had 17 offensive rebounds. The numbers said that Illinois is very good at getting to the free throw line, as they were. They shot 16 more free throw attempts than the Huskers did. But again, that's their play style. So and we'll talk about it here in just a second about the officiating and things like that. But, really Illinois did exactly what we kind of thought they were going to do in playing a lot of ISO ball. They didn't have great assist numbers. I take that back. I'm sorry. Assist to turnover ratio, what I meant, 18 assists to 14 turnovers there for the Illini. So, they didn't even take great care of the ball when it comes down to it. But shifting into that ref conversation, as it was a huge spotlight on Twitter, and we'll get into our Twitter mentions later that go into it. It was a really tough one, Mike. And again, we always try to not emphasize officiating just because, again, especially in this one, you look at the offensive rebounding numbers and things like that. If you bring that offensive rebounding number from 17 down to even like 12, you're probably winning that basketball game regardless of what happened with the officiating. But that call, signaling out personally, that call at the end of regulation, I struggle to justify calling that with 3 seconds on the clock in a 1-point game. I just didn't feel like that was an egregious enough foul on Wilcher to send a guy to the line. Obviously, again, at the end of the day, 17 offensive rebounds is the thing you're going to look at for why you lost that game. But the officiating did not help Nebraska's cause whatsoever in this one.
And I'm in the same boat. I'm never going to be one to point finger at, we lost because of bad refs, because there are plenty of things the Huskers could have done better to win the game. Obviously, you mentioned the rebounding. If we take care of the ball a little better, 9 turnovers is better. But if you cut down on those, we make a couple shots. We only shot 42% from the field, so you make a couple more shots here or there. It doesn't come down to one call. A call to generate a couple free throws in the first 5 minutes of this game had the same effect, right? Because it forced it to OT. But I thought, watching the game live, I felt that CJ bumped him. He got in his body, and maybe you could call the foul. But seeing some of the replays on Twitter this morning, it seemed to me that when he elevated, CJ got a hand on the ball, and it was pretty clean from my view. It's a tough call to make with 3 seconds left. It is what it is, though. I mean, that's the sport of basketball, and it's just a heartbreaking way to basically give up the game. It was on Domask. The dude shoots 90% from the line. We were lucky he missed one to even give us a chance in OT. So just incredibly tough situation, especially down the stretch. But, Illinois they're a very physical team. As we mentioned, they generate a lot of free throws. That's kind of what they do. So maybe the refs are more prone to be looking for that contact for them. Obviously, they killed us on the boards. They killed us in the paint. They outscored us 40-26 in the paint. So that's just their play style, and maybe that plays a little bit into it. The refs are a little more prone to blow the whistle in that situation. But just overall, real tough situation, yeah.
And what makes this one hurt so bad is that a win down in Champaign would have more or less punched the Huskers' ticket, barring an unforeseen mega collapse at the end of the season against a bunch of lower level opponents. Your ticket would have been punched. And that's why it's like you just snatched defeat from, well, really you snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, and then you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Yeah. So it's just, it's a weird dynamic that way. But that being said, Brad Underwood was very complimentary on Tominaga, his play style, and believes that Nebraska is an NCAA tournament team.
You see his release. You see where he shoots it from. He's one of the headiest and smartest players in college basketball. He had an elite defender guarding him most of the night in Terrence Shannon and still got him off. Then when you pair him, it's not just him, but when you pair him with Rank, and the thing with Casey is he gets as many twos as he does threes, and he's a very efficient finisher, but they can space the floor and cause problems. And tonight, those shots went down, and we were fortunate to withstand it. This is a really good basketball team. This is an NCAA tournament team that can go and win a lot of games.
Again, Brad Underwood very complimentary after his team nearly loses, a shocker, in a 10-point spread game. Nebraska again falls 87-84 in overtime. Nebraska shoots 43% from the field on 29 of 68, 43% from beyond the arc, going 12 of 28, makes all of their free throws, going 14 from 14 on 100% free throw shooting, and has 12 assists to 9 turnovers. Illinois on the other side shoots 41% from the field on 29 of 70 attempts, 26 from deep, going 9 of 34, 67% from the stripe, going 20 of 30, and the Illini notch 18 assists to 14 turnovers. So we've shared our thoughts on the game. Let's hear what everybody had to say on Twitter.
So Husker fans, let's hear from you.
But before we get into that, Mike, I believe you have an ad read to share.
I do have an ad read to share. This segment is brought to you by Tax and Business Consultants. Tax time is here, so trust the team that has taken the stress out of taxes since 1961. Tax and Business, your one-stop shop for all things tax, bookkeeping, and payroll. Their offices are located in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons, so give them a call at 402-426-4144 or visit their website at www.tbc.tax. That is T as in Tominaga, B as in Bryce Williams, and C as in CJ Wilcher.tax. Once again, that phone number is 402-426-4144, so give them a call and go Big Red.
I want to thank everybody, as always, out at Tax and Business Consultants for sponsoring the show. If you or somebody you know would like to sponsor a segment of the show, reach out to us on Twitter at Scarlet Shoot Pod via DM or email us at scarletshootaround@gmail.com. Okay, Mike, let's get into it. NU Husker Hoops leads us off by saying, this one hurts, but Nebraska's always had trouble in Illinois. This team is tough, probably tougher than any that I've watched. Any of 6 different guys can be the guy on any given night. Love watching them play as a team and figure it out, win or lose, and they're still going to win a lot more games this season. And I think he really puts it into perspective. Illinois and Champaign is a very, very tough place to win. I think Maryland, maybe, off the top of my head, I think maybe Tennessee got them or something in the non-con. But this is a really hard place to win, guys. Illinois leads the Big Ten in win percentage in conference over the last 5 years. So, the 10-point spread was very evident of that. This is a hard place to win, and the Huskers gave it their all.
Yeah, great team. Tough place to play. The guys gave it their all, as you mentioned. I thought really incredible in the second half. I think everybody and their grandma knew that Illinois was going to come out. They had been struggling from deep, so they're going to come out and pound the paint, and that's exactly what they did. Turned a 2-point deficit into a 7-point lead very early in the second half, and the guys didn't fold. Stuck around, clawed back. It got pushed to 10 there towards the end of the game. Answered with an 11-1 run to force OT. So incredible heart from the guys. They just never quit. And I know, in a couple other games this season on the road, it seems like the energy and the drive wasn't there, but there was no lack of energy or drive or heart or grit or whatever word you want to use to describe this team. They definitely played well enough to win, just unfortunate breaks down the end and couldn't pull it out. But what a performance from the guys, really. I couldn't be more proud of them.
Jackson Cortina says rebounding was the big difference in this one. Impressed with the effort. Officiating wasn't great, but wasn't the sole reason Nebraska lost. Good to see Casey back in a rhythm. Hopefully he goes on a similar run that he did the last February to close out these last 8 games. And again, as we mentioned earlier, everybody can point to officiating, and obviously in the heat of the moment, that's kind of the go-to right after in the post game, right? People want to talk about stuff. That call at the end of regulation, obviously going to have a big spotlight, but rebounding, again, Mike, as we talked about, a similar issue, but if Casey can come back to scoring what we know he's capable of scoring in that high teens, low 20s region, the 30-point bomb is obviously great. Not, I don't think, fair to expect every night, especially the way defenses play him. But when Casey plays like this, Mike, there's nobody in the country that we can't beat.
You're absolutely spot on. If he's contributing, as you mentioned, high teens, low 20s, shoot, even mid teens, because we got a lot more guys around him this year that can contribute and put the bucket or the ball in the bucket. But just getting some positive out of Casey on the offensive end. Obviously, he played a lot more minutes this game because you ride the hot hand, and it's nice to have the option of multiple hot hands that you can ride. Just love to see that from him. Hopefully February is his magic month again, and he gets hot and stays hot.
Texas Toast says, disappointed with the outcome, but beyond proud of the effort. And Haley Krull says, Tominaga had his get-back game. It was right in their grasp. That call at the end of regulation seems questionable to me, but it is what it is. No moral victories, and I'm glad it was a close game. And I tweeted this out after the game as well, Mike. There's no moral victories when it comes to chasing an NCAA tournament bid, but if there was ever a game to take positives out of, it is this one, in that the Huskers totally flipped the script on what people considered their road toughness, their road ability to take care of the ball. Obviously, rebounding is still an issue within that, but the metrics as well liked Nebraska's performance, Mike. And even in an overtime loss, we went up 5, 6, 7 spots in the predictive metrics across the board.
Yeah, and that's been the, talking to T3, previously, it seemed like the predictive metrics are what's kind of been holding the Huskers back as far as like net rating, things like that go. But yeah, it seems it's funny that an overtime loss can be almost as good as the Wisconsin win at home, but that's kind of what it looks like. We got a bump. As you said, mentioned, flip the script. I think if anybody had any doubt, they just need to go watch the second half and watch these guys fight and claw for everything in this game. As I'd mentioned, they definitely played well enough to win. Unfortunately, they couldn't pull it out, but it gives me high hopes that, don't call me crazy, but maybe they can finish on like an 8-0 run to finish the season here, something crazy like that, because this team looks really good right now and they're playing well enough to beat anybody.
Danger Cactus says, to say the refs were inconsistent would be the polite way of putting it. Love the fight we saw late in regulation. Still need to rebound better, though. And Rygolf 1975 says, extremely proud of this team and extremely disappointed in the Big Ten referees. Pathetic, inconsistent, home court biased, just a joke. And I will say the officiating, frankly, again, was a joke, but I think you can say that while also saying that Nebraska didn't help their own cause, again, in certain aspects of the game, as you talk about rebounding and things of the like. But it's just a tough, again, I guess I would tell people to look back at the Wisconsin game and say that not many people commented on the officiating in that one, although I think the foul discrepancy was 6-0, like late in the second half. So you kind of only remember it if it's negatively affecting you and not positively. So, it's hard, but sometimes you have to really take a step back and look at the whole body of work of really what we're talking about when it comes to an officiating standpoint.
And maybe that's why it's been so tough just in general on the road this season in the Big Ten. It seems like maybe there's some Big Ten home cooking. As you mentioned, that Wisconsin game. Yeah, in the second half, it was 6-0. Wisconsin had fouls and we had 0. So it's a lot better being on the other end. Just sucks to, obviously officiating is always going to make, it's going to impact the game, how they're calling it, whether they're going to let them play and be physical or a tight whistle. But as you mentioned, just got to take a step back. It's one game. The officiating's been, spotty all season. And that's just, that's kind of college sports. You're not, these aren't, I shouldn't say that these aren't professionals because the refs are professionals. This is their job. But they're not, it's not the peak of the profession. So you'd hope for some better. And maybe the Big Ten can make some changes. Who knows? But it's just something you got to live with. And as I mentioned, I'm never going to be one to point the finger and say, oh, the refs are the reason we lost. But definitely need some better officiating down the stretch, hopefully, going both ways, not just for the Huskers' sake, but hate to see any team lose the way the Huskers did, honestly.
Husker Adams says, Nebraska ball got absolutely robbed by the Big Ten referees. Worst officiating I've seen all year, and that is a mouthful considering the terrible quality of Big Ten refs. So piling on there. And honestly, again, we talk about all of these are live right after the game, so emotions run high. And then Brian Edwards says, disappointed, but it's not a bad loss. Really, of course, it'd be better if we hadn't lost to Minnesota and Rutgers. And I think we look back, and even when we did lose to Minnesota on the road there earlier this season, Mike, we even kind of talked about how this is the kind of loss that will follow you throughout the season. And Rutgers, now it's going to follow you throughout the season, not because they're bad losses, but now when you look at the surrounding evidence, if you will, for lack of a better term, and the surrounding details of it, we now, because we didn't secure either of those wins, we're still chasing this road Big Ten win. And it really, as T3 talked about in our last episode, is the biggest thing holding this team back.
Yeah, we don't have a complete body of work is what I would say right now, because we are lacking a conference road win. I mean, there's no way about it. And it's hard to, I'd imagine it's hard as the committee to say this team didn't win a single game on road in conference. They should be in the tournament playing away from their home floor. Like I'd imagine that's tough. The good thing is we have plenty more opportunities to get some down the stretch. I think we got five more road games, so maybe four. I can't remember off the top of my head, but still plenty of opportunities. As we mentioned, the schedule gets a lot softer here after the Wisconsin Illinois. Northwestern's still a pretty tough matchup, but after that it gets relatively soft. So plenty of opportunities to round out that body of work, get a couple conference road wins, and come Selection Sunday, hopefully we're in a pretty good spot.
Jalanga Lozi says, proud of how the Huskers played. Tominaga could not miss. It's an encouraging show on the road. And Drew Urbon says, this team will kick themselves in the film session for the 50-50 balls and rebounds they didn't secure, which led to second chances for Illinois in the second half. That said, this team is developing grit and toughness and playing with confidence that will serve them well the rest of the year. And Mike, I think the biggest thing, if you're looking for positives to take away from this Illinois game, is it seems to me that the idea that this team is lacking toughness, lacking grit, you can now put to the side. And I think the team showed that even they believe now that they can go on the road and win. And they looked plenty confident enough to do that last night in Champaign.
Yeah, it seemed like they had a little bit of an edge to them, honestly. It's a different experience going in on the road and being the bad guy in the arena, right? But sometimes you just got to live it up and have that bit of edge. I think, as I had mentioned, they came back from 7 down early in the second half, 10 down later in the second half, just never quit, always grinding and clawing. And that's the type of team, I love to see. I've said it multiple times already, I'm very proud of this team. A lot of their Twitter replies are talking about how proud we are of this team. Because they did. They showed that grit and that toughness that we've wanted all season on the road. It sucks that it couldn't come in a win, but if they play like that against this next Northwestern matchup, I have the utmost faith that they'll be able to pull out the win, honestly. So if they can just keep that level of play at where it is right now, they're in a great spot to go on a big run down the stretch here in this season.
Whizbang Hoops says, much needed K-State bounce back game. We got hosed. We'll probably go up in the metrics because the net is a very serious ranking system. And obviously, as we just mentioned, we did go up in the metrics. So Whizbang Hoops may be a little bit of a fortune teller in that realm. And then David in Lincoln says, time to start Gary over Alec at the beginning of halves. I don't think they go on that run to start the half if he's in. Crazy that you have to play 7 or 8 points better than the home team just to tie it. Rebounding is also tough when they jump all over our backs. And Mike, is there something to be said for getting Juwan Gary starting in that second half over Alec? Because it feels to me like every time that we've led going into the second half, you look at Rutgers, look at obviously this Illinois data point now, you look at Minnesota. Early in the second half, the Huskers seem to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's easy to say that, we should put Gary in, but we also have to realize it's basically a whole new ballgame. There's a lot of adjustments from both teams coming out in the second half. So it's not surprising to me if the first 4 is just completely different before we get to see what they're adjusting to, they're seeing what we're adjusting to, and things settle down a little bit. I don't know if, Gary should be starting. I don't feel, qualified to make that call. He's playing starter minutes at this point anyways for me. So he's playing plenty. I couldn't tell you if he should be starting the second half and preventing these runs. But it's just tough to see him come out and, get a little hole and have to claw back like they had to this game, as you mentioned, Rutgers game, Minnesota game. Multiple data points now where hopefully they just, find a way to come out a little bit hotter and make a couple shots and just keep that lead, keep right around tied and not have a hole to climb out of, 5-10 minutes into the second half.
And the start of that second half spelled doom for the Huskers as Illinois went on a 13-4 run with 10 of those 13 points coming directly underneath the hoop, forcing Nebraska to play from behind the entirety of the second half up until obviously they took the lead with 8 seconds left there at the end of regulation. Sam Hoiberg fan says, not a terrible loss, but we get over it and prepare for Wednesday. We have one last opportunity at a quad 1 road win that can make it much easier to make it into the tourney. Now, technically, theoretically, Ohio State is a quad 1 win, but again, as we've talked about, they're on a tailspin, so they'll be kind of right on the margin of whether or not they'll be a quad 1 when we get to that point. And then rounding us out, Joel Schaefer says, Brad Underwood is a terrible coach. Hawkins is insufferable. The refs were abysmal. We needed more from CJ and Bryce, but good to see Casey bounce back. I firmly believe that we're the fourth best team in the Big Ten. And Mike, I suppose a lot of that fourth place in the Big Ten team type of talk is going to be determined here Wednesday in Evanston, as some bracketologists, I believe NKY, I tweeted tonight, has both of them on that 10 seed line right in the middle there. So the winner should build themselves some goodwill, and the loser is going to be right firmly on the smack of the bubble talk.
No, I think you're spot on. This game against Northwestern, they're another team right where we're at in the season. They have a big win over Purdue like we do. They've been super consistent. They've been great this whole season, which, credit to them. But yeah, if we're jostling for that kind of fourth place, which is crazy to talk about, thinking back to the season preview, I'm like, oh man, if we're in the 8th place conversation, I might be happy, but there's a legitimate conversation to be had. And as you mentioned, I think that will be determined on the road here. If we can finish off this, season sweep against Northwestern, take this one in Evanston, I think that firmly cements us as kind of that fourth best team as it stands in the conference. And I don't see how there'd be a big discussion about it, to be honest.
So I want to thank all of you again for sharing your thoughts. If you'd like to partake on this segment, make sure you reply to our tweet at the end of every game after the final buzzer asking Huskers, what were your reactions to X win or X loss? And we take all of those replies, conglomerate the best ones, and make sure that we put them onto the show. And when we win a game, for those new listeners, as we've gotten quite an explosion in Twitter followers over the past week or so, if you're new to our show, anytime we win a Big Ten game, we have a sweatshirt giveaway. Now, obviously, because we lost to Illinois, we do not have that for this one, but hopefully that we have one Thursday after the Northwestern game. And that being said, we'll transition into our Northwestern preview on the other side of the break.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
Okay, Mike, let's get into this Northwestern preview. They are 15-7 on the year, 6-5 in conference. KenPom has them slotted at 49th. Net rankings, they check in at 58th. They're 4th currently in the Big Ten standings as we sit here Monday night. Notable wins for the Wildcats include number 2 Purdue at home, 92-88 in overtime earlier this season. The only other team in the country to beat Purdue in this regular season. Number 10 Illinois at home, 96-91 in overtime. A little bit earlier this year, maybe a week or two ago. And then number 56, Ohio State at home, 83-58. Notable losses for the Wildcats include losing to number 2 Purdue on the road in a nail-biter, 105-96 in overtime, where I believe Purdue shot like 30 more free throws than Northwestern did, which is a very interesting comment on note of the refs as of late. Number 76, Minnesota on the road. They are coming off a loss, 75-66 in overtime up in Minneapolis. And the last time these teams met, they lost to number 46, Nebraska on the road, 75-69. So, Mike, this team is 33rd nationally and 4th in the conference on offense, 92nd nationally, 13th in the conference on defense. What about this team sticks out to you?
As I just mentioned, they're very similar, at least their resume, very similar to the Huskers. They got a big win over Illinois. They got a big win over Purdue, just like we kind of have big home wins over Purdue and Wisconsin. The thing that sticks out to me about this team and how they play, they're very slow, which I feel like I say that about every team in the Big Ten. It's kind of funny, but they're very slow, 334th in tempo in the country. That's only 11th in the conference. So yeah, the Big Ten is a little bit slow as far as conferences go, but they play very slow. But they're really efficient. We'll talk about some players in a bit, but 30th nationally in effective field goal percent. They take care of the ball, 13th nationally in turnover percent on the offensive side, and they shoot the three really well. Boo Booey's obviously gonna get a lot of the talk, but last time we played, Brooks Barnheiser had his at the time career high. I don't know if he surpassed that. He shoots well beyond the arc. Langborn shoots well beyond the arc. Ty Berry shoots well beyond the arc. So very much another team kind of like Nebraska there. They want to shoot the three. They play a little bit slower than we generally do, but they got the shooters to space the floor, and they're going to challenge the Huskers on that end.
You mentioned Northwestern's three-point shooting ability, Mike. It's really fascinating. The Wildcats boast the 5th, 7th, 8th, and 11th best three-point shooters individually in conference on this Wildcats squad. So a lot of different guys that can hurt you, highlighted obviously by all Big Ten point guard Boo Buie, the 6'2 senior, averaging 19, 4, and 6, shooting 44% from the field, 40% from deep. He only had 9 points, 0 rebounds, and 7 assists his last time out in Lincoln. His 3-point shot is up 4 points since the last time we played him, so he's been lighting it up as the season has progressed. And in Lincoln, he only went 1 of 6 from deep and 2 of 15 from the field. He's complemented by their shooting guard, Ty Berry, a 6'3 senior, averaging 12, 4, and 1, shooting 46% from the field, a very nice 43% from deep. Again, he also was held in check, only scoring 6, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist last time out in Lincoln. We shut him down well. He went 2 of 10 from the field, 2 of 8 from 3. And Mike, I got to expect that those numbers are going to go up at home.
I mean, you'd anticipate these guys are too good to be held down like the Huskers did to them last game. So don't be surprised if they come back and they have quite a few makes. They score quite a few more points. The big answer to me is if we can stop the others. I had mentioned Barnheiser, Langborn. Last time we played, Barnheiser had 24 points, 7 for 10 from 2, 2 of 5 from 3. And then Langborn showed 40%, 4 for 10 from beyond the arc last time these teams played in Lincoln. So if we're going to give up points to Berry and Bowie, which wouldn't be surprising, we got to make sure that we do the job on Langborn and Barnheiser. Got to lock them down. We can't be having multiple guys having good shooting nights, or else it's going to be a long night on the defensive end.
Of note, between Langborg and Barnheiser, defensively, they both had 4 steals. Barnheiser added 2 blocks along a monster stat line of 24 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists last time they played in Lincoln. So going to be a couple tough matchups. We'll see how Fred schemes up a defense to make sure we limit those guys as best we can while making sure that Bowie and Berry are held under their averages. Now, rounding out the Wildcats offensively, Mike, they are an awful rebounding team, but most specifically on the offensive side, they're 305th nationally and last in the conference in offensive rebounding percentage. Now, that being said, I think it plays to Nebraska's advantage on the rebounding side, as rebounding is obviously, as mentioned many times, been an issue for the Huskers on the road. But Mike, this team also does not get to the free throw line much. They're 307th nationally and 12th in conference in free throws attempted per field goals attempted. And even when they get to the line, they don't shoot them very well either. They're 160th nationally and 9th in the conference in free throw percentage. So a couple spots here of maybe Husker advantage against the Northwestern offense.
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen if we can rebound on the road. As you mentioned, it's been something we've talked about the entire season. But if there's one team kind of as a get-right game or we can do something to improve that, it's definitely against Northwestern. As you mentioned, they're last in the conference in offensive rebounding percent. So they're not going to get a lot of second chance points, you would hope, as compared to what we saw against Illinois. So yeah, big opportunity for the Huskers, to come in, start securing those rebounds, securing missed shots. If they do happen to be missing shots, as we mentioned, and fantastic shooting team. They're number 1 in the conference. In conference play, they're shooting 44% from 3. So they haven't been missing a lot in conference from beyond the arc. But when they do, it's vital that we pull down the boards, because you don't want to give them second chances. They're going to find another open look, and more than likely, they're not going to miss 2 in a row.
Now, we talked about offensively, they have some pretty scary numbers, being first in the conference in 3-point shooting. Defensively, they're not much of a worry, Mike. They're going to do exactly what they've done all year and what they did against us last game here in Lincoln. They play super aggressively. They're 40th nationally and 3rd in the conference in defensive turnover percentage. They're 55th nationally and 3rd in conference in steal percentage, forcing 18 against the Huskers last time. But they're an even worse defensive team than Nebraska is. And obviously Nebraska is not known for their defense this season. They're 261st nationally and last in the conference in defensive effective field goal percentage, and 312th nationally and 13th in conference in 3-point defense, 192nd national and 12th in conference in 2-point defense. So Mike, their on-ball defense, for lack of a better term, is awful.
Yeah, not very great. And just to give, you said 13th in conference in defensive 3-point shooting. I mentioned they're shooting 44%. Opponents are shooting 39% from 3. So not great, as you mentioned, on the ball defenders. They give up a ton of free throws. Part of that might be because Purdue shot 45 of them, or however many it was, 2 games ago, end of January when they played. But they, on defensive end, they actually give up the most percentage of points in the conference from free throws. So if we're going to drive and we're going to draw contact, it's a great opportunity for us. I know we don't have necessarily a lot of guys that can do that, but I think about a Jawan Gary, a Bryce Williams, typically likes to pull up a little bit more, but he definitely has the ability to go to the hoop, If we can work Rink inside, I don't want us to fall in love with the three. Obviously, they're not great at defending the three, but they're not great at defending anywhere. And if we can go inside, they don't go very deep. They're 342nd in the country in bench minutes. So it seems like I say this all the time because it's kind of generic, but if you can get them into foul trouble, that's going to hurt this team more than your typical team because they do not go to the bench hardly at all. It's going to be Boo Buie and Ty Berry and Langborn and Barnheiser, and then a Martinelli or a Luke Hunger or whoever their fifth is. But it's going to be those four guys. If we can get somebody, any one of those four into foul trouble, it's going to dramatically improve our chances.
And playing into that, Mike, Northwestern, pause. And playing into that, Mike, opposing offenses are picking apart the Northwestern defense. They're 330th nationally and 11th in the conference in defensive assists per field goal made. So I think a lot of teams are having success driving in against that Northwestern defense and kicking it out. Key being, obviously, as you mentioned, if we can get them into foul trouble, this team is very, very, probably the most shallow team from a bench standpoint that we'll see all year. So very, very much needs to be an emphasis to try your absolute best to get Gary, to get Bryce Williams, to get Rink Mass going downhill and try to get some fouls on some of their big four amongst Bowie, Berry, Langborg, and Barnheiser. Now, Mike Ken Pomp's projecting this to a 75-72 Northwestern win. Torvik projecting a 75-71 Wildcat win. Let's put this projected spread at Northwestern -3. Where are you heading here?
I am going to... I'm gonna take the Huskers. I think this is the chance. This is finally the opportunity. They're gonna get the monkey off their back. They're gonna secure a massive, quad one road win, and the metrics are gonna love it from us. I think the Huskers are gonna abuse the defense for Northwestern. I think we're gonna key in, as you mentioned. Northwestern caused 18 turnovers the last time these teams played in Lincoln. I would not be surprised if it is getting drilled into our guys to take care of the ball, because that's the only way I think this Northwestern team is going to beat us, is if we gave up the ball that many times again. The last couple of games, there's been some lazy passes out of the top of the key for, breakaway layups. Chucky Hepburn had 2. I think it was Hawkins had 1 last game. If we can take care of the ball, get into our offense, don't give them free, easy transition looks where they can generate high quality shots. I like the Huskers. I think we're going to score plenty to win this game. I think we'll do a good enough job on defense. I like the Huskers winning 79-72.
I'm actually going to take Nebraska in the spread as well, but I'm going to take a Northwestern win here, Mike. So I'm going to take the Nebraska +3 points. I think Northwestern, as we talked about, fouls a ton, and free throw shooting is actually one of our strengths. So I think that plays well into what the Huskers are trying to do, as well as Northwestern having a short bench. They want to play a shootout style game, Mike, and I think that's kind of what Fred Hoiberg wants to do in general, especially with our defensive inability at times to rebound and defend on ball. So I think that actually, again, Northwestern plays very well into what we want to do in some aspects, but obviously, as you mentioned, the key to this game is turnovers. I think if we have 9 or fewer turnovers, I really like our chances in this one, as we were lucky to even escape Lincoln with a win, giving them 18 turnovers and holding. I mean, the only reason we won that game is because we held their stars to going 4 of 25 from the field in Bowie and Berry. So again, can't expect that again. So the turnover numbers are going to have to come down. I'm going to predict an 81-79 Northwestern win here on a last possession shot. That being said, Nebraska gets a cover, but like we said, no moral victories, and this is not betting advice. So, and of note, I must mention, I wrote at the bottom of my notes here, Chicago State is the only team that has had the guts to go into Welsh Ryan Arena and win this year. So Nebraska can join the likes of the highly regarded Chicago State. I don't even know what their mascot is, like Wildcats or Bobcats or something. But regardless, Nebraska going to battle here for a much-needed road win in this trip up to Evanston. So we will get you out of here on the other side of the break.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
Okay, Mike. Well, this is probably most likely the last quad one opportunity that the Huskers have remaining on the schedule. So really very important that they give this their absolute best shot. This would be a huge win as we head down the home stretch of our soft schedule.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, the Chicago State Cougars is their mascot. So big opportunity to join the Cougars with a massive dub at Northwestern. As I mentioned in my takeaway, I like our chances. I think the guys are playing as well right now in these last 2 games as they have probably all season. I'm sure they're sick and tired of not having these road wins, and I'm sure they hear it, and I'm sure they see it online. So I think they're going to walk in with a chip on their shoulder. I think they're going to come out and they're going to just fight and dig. It's a game of runs, and I'm sure Northwestern, they got the talent to go on a couple of runs. But I'm confident that our guys are going to respond, and I'm confident they're going to walk away with the win. And I'm really excited to see how this matchup ends up.
Northwestern also coming off back-to-back overtime losses on the road, so maybe we can catch them in a spot where morale may be down a little bit. That being said, Nebraska with a great opportunity here. I think Northwestern, as we talked about, matches up well, and this would be a huge win for our resume, and really the only big missing piece we need to really ensure our tournament ticket to be punched as we round out the year. So that being said, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Scarlet Shoot Pod. We post anything as it correlates to the Nebraska basketball season, whether it be injury reports, bracketology updates, obviously our post-game tweets, and we live tweet every game on there as well. So great follow on Twitter. I may encourage you to go over there and follow that. On YouTube at Scarlet Shoot Pod, Mike posts the YouTube videos, and that's obviously been a little bit of a crazy hectic deal now that we've been on a very quick turn and run of events. So always want to thank Mike for the hard work he does on that side of things. And on Instagram at Scarlet Shoot Pod, we post anything where the podcast may be, again, correlated with the Husker basketball program, mostly with sweatshirts and things like that. So Mike, this is a really big one. Let's make sure we take care of business, have a great opportunity to really finalize that resume as we head into March. For myself, Blake, and co-host Mike, go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.